Is it fine? Your thingy is here. Should I switch this off? Your phone? Should I switch it off? Sorry. Is it on? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say, can you give us like 5 minutes? Our speaker is literally coming in the next 5 minutes or so, but we should start. Sorry about that. Thanks. 5 minutes. Oh, is it? Okay. Yes, the project is here and stuff. Is
Okay. How do you do?
Good and you?
All right. So,
You're gonna use yours?
yeah, I have an adapter.
Okay.
You were nervous, eh? You're giving us air.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right. I know. Adventure.
Yes.
Adventure.
Want it down there or up here?
Oh, okay. Yeah, here's fine. Be better. So why don't we do that?
Gonna use sound also or just
Yes. Sounds on the other side.
can you just play something with this?
You said play something?
Let's see. Yeah. It's your US stuff. Some program description. Should we all sorted?
No, 1 second, just
Yeah.
testing the sound.
Sorted?
Sorted.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Mosa Hadi. I'm the programs manager for the first Ubuntu series. Basically, the program, it's funded by Mellon, and as you can see, movement around the museum. The aim is to change how museums are consumed and how the practice of museum are. So in between things, you will see people moving in and out, watching and coming to view the exhibition from the vault, which is important. But also is to also create and shape the museum so that we can have dialogues in the museum itself, but also to have a collaborative relationship. And our partners are the Michigan State University. And the project is in three sort of components. The first one is the student dialogues. So we have students who are debating with Michigan State University students. Then we have the seminar exchange. And Frederick W he's one of the first from the US to come and present for us. So thank you so much for attending really our first Ubuntu dialogue. And also the director is here, Bongani, who was very critical in creating and I guess decolonizing the space of museums in many levels. So as you know, let me introduce, we're taking photos, selfies already. Professor Frederick W is an associate professor within the Honors College at the Texas Christian University. His work really is about race within mainstream media, effectively contextualizing problematic patterns based upon the historical roots. His work, his most famous work is You Mean There Is a Genius in My Hip Hop. Then he has done other work in thinking about hip hop as a tool for teaching, for activism, as an art history in the academy, as well as today he's thinking about, his topic is about the magic of Musical Ubuntu, how hip hop has recreated cultural capital in the absence of structural resources. So as a hip hop fan, I'm excited. And also thinking about the notion of Ubuntu because it's actually at the core of our work and trying to reshape the museum. So we're excited. You have about 20 minutes. I'm glad you're here. We were worried that he won't be here. He just arrived literally now. So we are happy that you are here. So welcome. You have about 20 minutes and let's have a discussion. Let's have fun about these dialogues as well. So you have about 20 minutes, then we can open it up for people to ask you more about the questions and how you understand Ubuntu in your field.
Yes.
So thank you. Please
Thank you.
give him a round of applause. And clap for yourselves as well for being patient. Yeah?
Thank you. So as Mosa just indicated, I literally just flew in, just landed less than an hour ago, so my arms are kind of tired. No, I'm just kidding. My name is Dr. Frederick W. Jr. I come to you from the United States of America. I want to acknowledge the land that I'm on and the indigenous people who inhabited it. And also, I just want to let you know that I'm not just an African American, but I am a living descendant of those who survived the horrors of enslavement. And so I stand here before you, making this connection back to the motherland. When I came through the airport, I said, welcome to the mother city, and it feels good to be back home. So here's the roadmap. Very briefly, I'm just going to outline a little bit about what is hip hop, and then talk about how it actually connects to the concept of Ubuntu here in South Africa for us. Okay, if I were just to outline really quickly the situation here. If I were to ask you, where does hip hop come from? Does anyone know where hip hop comes from? Its origin. Also said it was supposed to be interactive. Does anyone know where it comes from? No? No guesses? You say Africa? All right, that's a very good guess. I mean, does it come from the beaches of Malibu? No, of course not, right? So we know that it comes from a very specific place and time and space. Now, this is where it came from. It came from South Bronx, New York City. Now, why is this important? This is important because, as you can tell from the picture, it's under-resourced. You're talking about black and brown people who are largely marginalized, disaffected, disillusioned, and left without structural resources. They essentially were much the same position as, I don't know, does this look familiar? Shanty towns here, right? You see them on your way coming off the airport. It's impossible to ignore Lenga, stretching out to Kialicha, right? And apparently they're still growing, right? You know, despite the fact that apartheid is still over. And if anything, we've seen the shanty towns as home of this insect alien-like species in the movie District 9, right? So in other words, think about what the movie makers were thinking in their heads, that this was so foreign, this was so abject and impoverished, that this would be a perfect home for aliens to live. It was actually filmed on location. It wasn't a Hollywood set, unlike the boat that I saw coming in here, right, that Hollywood set, okay. So, really quickly, you have to understand that, at least in my country, right, I have a colleague from Michigan State with me here, how the party got started as far as people like me. Remember, I told you, I'm a living descendant. This is how the party got started. Under the auspices of enslavement, okay? Remember, I know that you heard of people like Obama, you've seen LeBron James, you've seen Oprah Winfrey on TV, but we have to understand that this is how it got started. The relationship with African Americans started in tension, right? Where people were objectified and used to labor for someone else's American dream. And so when you look at this picture, who's the president in this picture? Lincoln, very good. So you've seen Lincoln before. He's known as the Great Emancipator, and as you see the name of the statue, it's called Emancipation. Question, do the two people in the statue look equal? Of course not. One is fully clothed, one is standing erect, one has his hand over the other. And what's fascinating is that there's two of these statues, one in Boston, Massachusetts, and one in Washington, D.C. They're still erected. You talk about taking down Confederate memorial statues. You talk about taking down, the Rhodes statue, right? This idea that we no longer want these symbols that represent oppression. Well, these statues still exist. They're still erected. And if anything, they symbolize the idea of free, but not equal. Free, but not equal. Very important. Why is this important? Well, because after emancipation, the 13th Amendment, most people overlooked the fact that there was a loophole. Slavery was abolished in 1865, not by the Emancipation Proclamation, by the way, by the 13th Amendment, but there was a loophole. It said, wherefore there will be no slavery except wherefore the party has been duly convicted of a crime. Why is this important? Because immediately after people were free, you now have what's called the criminalization of blackness. In southern states, mostly the Confederate states, you had the creation of what's called black codes, where, say, on Monday you had enslavement, Tuesday you're free, Wednesday, do you have a job? No. On Wednesday, do you have any education? No. Because remember, on Monday it was illegal for you to do so. But see, on Wednesday, they now created a new law saying that you are a vagrant. Off to jail you go. And this is how we perpetuate the same game by a different name. So understand that this tension of African Americans is still continuing. And again, not to be morbid part of people, but I just want to let you know that right now I teach at Texas Christian University. One of the largest lynchings that ever took place in Paris, Texas. 19,000 people came out for extrajudicial illegal lynching of a black man. So remember, they would advertise these in the papers. This here is a postcard. This was sent through the postal service. So all I want you to understand, as I begin my topic about hip hop, is to understand that hip hop comes from a people who were oppressed over time. Remember, it's not just racism, but for me, I've coined this term, it's what I call psi racism. It's structural, it's cyclical, it's institutional. It's not just a light switch that you flip and, oh, okay, we're done with it. You know, there's no longer people walking around in chains. No, we must understand that there's been this continued systemic, structural, institutional bond that has tried to keep people captive, that is. And so for me, when you look at a picture like this, does this make you happy? It doesn't make me happy. It's a wasteful picture. It's all this waste in our environment. But the idea is that, well, what about human waste? You see, because we have so many of our young black and brown boys and girls who are literally being thrown away by the system. This is a picture of two 12-year-olds who were arrested for skateboarding, riding their bikes. So, what to do? Well, the fact of the matter is that we now have this resource called hip-hop. And I believe hip-hop is as wide and deep as the ocean. Now, I'll explain in a moment. I want to preface my comments by saying that I don't think hip-hop is perfect. As with most things that are made by humans, it's not perfect. And in fact, I think three key criticisms are that it's materialistic, it's full of misogyny, and it's a lot of violence or mayhem. In other words, gun, gold, and girls, right, is the focus. And many of those critiques, I think, are valid. Okay. But that being said, what I want us to focus on in this conversation is that the real hip-hop, because most of what you're actually criticizing is what we call rap music. It's commercialized and commodified. But the real hip-hop music, okay, is an organized response to many of those tensions I had articulated earlier. And so it has a way of being in direct conversation with destructive forces. And the antidote, ladies and gentlemen, is creation. How does hip-hop do it? Very briefly, because I want to make the connection here to what's happening here in South Africa. There are 5 key elements. First is the DJ. The DJ is the one who sets up the party. Without any music, it's just a gathering, right? And so I think what's important is that here we cannot overlook the innovation involved in putting 2 turntables together. Remember, I'm limited with my resources. And the idea is that the reason why you have 2 turntables is because the DJ was looking out in the field and saw that there was a certain part in their song when people used to dance just a little bit more. They were just getting to the groove a little bit more. That part was called the break. A break meaning that there wasn't very much articulation of lyrics. It wasn't chorus. It was more of the beat that you could actually groove to, right, in the middle of the song. So what they did was, again, let's not overlook the genius that's taking place here. I have 2 records of the same song. I cue up that part, the break on one, right? I have my headphones on, and then I play it. And then what I do is I cue it up on the same different turntable, same record. And then the idea is that once this fades out, I simply move over my crossfader, I play that exact same loop, and then while this is playing on the second one, I'm able to rewind and set it back up again on the first one. How long can I go back and forth with this? How long? All night long. All night long, right? See, again, forgive me, I'm from the African American tradition, call and response. So when I ask you a question, I like the energy, I recycle it, right? Okay, so what I'm saying is all night long, you understand? So what's happening here is even though I'm limited, even though I have nothing, what have I done? I've now manipulated time and space. Wow. And if you don't think this is impressive, you go home, you put together 2 of your iPhones tonight and come up with something new, right? In terms of, I'm just gonna take something that's limited and create something entirely new. And then you have the MC who started to inject themselves, right? They had the microphone. At first, they were just delivering instructions to the party people, but then they became a little bit more personal, telling their own personal stories. Then you have breakdancing, right? Or B-boy, B-girl. Remember, the B comes from the break, that part of the song we talked about, where people became more animated. Then you have street art, a la graffiti. Some of us might say that it's property destruction. Well, another of us might say, well, what do? You saw the black and white picture earlier, if your canvas is plain. This is, if any way, a political way of taking back your environment, adding color to your canvas plane, stating that I have humanity, dignity, respect, I exist, I am here too. And again, you tell me 2 questions. Is this easy? Right? Well, try it with the spray can, let alone with like colored pencils. And then secondly, what's the difference between this and Mount Rushmore? I mean, who gave who the authority to go and carve images of a bunch of dead white men on a bunch of rocks? I mean, how is that not defacing or is it honoring? I mean, either way, what I'm saying is it's the same argument, right? As far as how we're going to take our environment, okay? And then lastly, the last element that I think separates hip hop from traditional rap music is called knowledge of self, right? This is where hip hop takes a much more substantive element. It would be akin to the difference of fast food versus a home cooked meal. Listen, I'm not above anybody. I do eat fast food from time to time, right? Nothing hits the spot like a good set of, hot, salty chips, right? But at the same time, I can't eat chips every day. It's not good for my system. And notice the time that it takes for a home-cooked meal. Notice the communal gathering, the sharing of stories, right? The idea that I stay fuller longer. That's the difference between knowledge of self and rap music that you hear in the radio talking about bling, bling, guns, gold, and girls, right? Many hip-hop songs you've never even heard of. They talk about existentialism. They talk about how to survive, what to think about, playing moon and stars. I mean, I say a couple head nods. You know what I'm talking about. Okay, so what does this mean? Well, very briefly, in the very time I have remaining, I just want to point out that, remember, the title of my talk is In the Absence of Structural Resources. Hip-hop does not receive enough credit. I've flown thousands of miles to remind you, hip-hop does not receive enough credit for how it recycles and repurposes. Do you notice what he's breakdancing on top of? What is he breakdancing on top of? Cardboard box. So in other words, by taking something that is normally thrown away, he literally made something useful to protect himself, as opposed to scratching his head on a rough concrete surface, right? So we're using that material. What material is this? Milk crates. Again, in inner city urban area, often discarded, thrown away as junk, but this is now a convenient way with which to transport records, right? And it's a hallmark of being true to the craft. And then not only that, but also people as well. Does anyone recognize who this artist is? Yeah. Can nobody tell me nothing? Well, how about people told him he was nothing? He was homeless. His own sister said, you can't sleep on my couch anymore. And what does he do? He samples a rock song from 9 Inch Nails, and then later, he is a Grammy winner. He is also out of the closet, and he's living his best life. So in other words, before, he was told he was nothing, struggling with his identity, and now by giving voice, articulating his true thoughts and ideas and feelings through the vehicle of hip-hop, he now has a place in the world and has opened up space for millions of others who have similar stories. And so again, party people, hip-hop, if anything, is a powerful, poignant, and poetic, yes, the alliteration is purposeful, expression of humanity, dignity, and respect. This is what hip-hop is. And if anything, what I wanted to say was, thank you for hip-hop. Okay, I don't know if you heard, but he said this is dedicated. This is Biggie Smalls, by the way. I'm sure you've heard the song. It's very famous. But he said this song is dedicated to who? All the teachers who told me I'd never amount to nothing. So I know he's Biggie Smalls and he's famous, this, that, and the third. But how about when he was just a young kid and a teacher violated their responsibility to find what was best in the individual and bring it out of them. And so despite of that, he was able to find his voice. And party people, what I'm suggesting is it was through the vehicle of hip hop. If anything, thank God that we have hip hop as an outlet by which he's able to voice himself and his ideas, his thoughts, his feelings, and become somebody. Because if anything, this is what we would call an inappropriate way of how people express themselves. I don't know if any of these names look familiar, but you have Patrick Crucis, the guy with the glasses, upper left-hand corner. He shot 46 people. You have Seth Ator down below him. He shot 33 people. David Long, former Marine in the far right corner, he shot 25 people. Devin P. Kelly, down beneath him, shot 47 people. Stephen Paddock, down in the middle, he shot 481 people. And then you have Dylan Roof, who after going into a South Carolina church to pray with black parishioners, shot 9 of them dead inside of the church. So what's fascinating, right, is that in my country, when you look at the news, I'm the threat, right? People want to cross the street, switch their purse, I'm the threat. If anything, I should be scared of white males in my country. This is a very inappropriate way to deal with disaffection and disillusionment. But see, hip hop has another way. It is truly sustainable. And it makes connections to history. Look at Beyonce talking about I break chains all by myself. J. Cole creating songs talking about be free. In the absence of structural resources, because we're limited with respect to time, we're limited with respect to land on the planet. We're not making any more of that. But again, party people, hip hop is as wide and deep as the ocean. And so in conclusion, when we talk about what does Ubuntu mean? I am who I am because of other people. I think the struggle against apartheid is a global lesson on how people came together in the absence of structural resources. And so what's fascinating is even though I look at an American side, a song like Fight the Power, it's by Chuck D. I see similarities to the Toy Toy marches. People bonding together under the common banner and bond of song, moving their bodies as one purposeful union. This is absolutely immensely powerful. And so we even have local artists such as Ill Skills, and they'll tell us about how they're leveraging hip hop. Listen very quickly. I don't know if you caught what he just said. He said, Emil and heal the hood. Emil is the individual in the middle holding the book here. And by purposefully using the vehicle of hip hop, he has been able to affect hundreds, if not thousands, of school kids locally here in Cape Town, right? Again, by using hip hop as a way of expression, he actually raps in multiple languages. Because what many people do is outside the United States is they'll often try to imitate Americans and imitate the American accent. And the idea is that, no, you have your identity, you have your value, you have your voice, right? You have your thoughts and ideas, and you can articulate them in your own local dialect, right? So again, this is an example of how we are truly utilizing ourselves and the principles of Ubuntu by coming together and recognizing the humanity we have in one another to simply live this thing called life. Because I don't know about you, but I'm gonna die someday, right? I don't know about y'all, but I'm gonna have to go. And, and where I go, I'm not sure. I hope it's a nice place. I hope I've done enough. But the idea is that what about while we're here on earth? I'm not necessarily anesthetized by this idea of once I reach heaven, then I'll go through the pearly gates and then everything will be great. No, the idea is what about right here now? We have one life to live, and God bless these youth who have utilized hip hop as a vehicle to articulate their voices, to give rise to their thoughts and inner feelings, making themselves vulnerable and finding strength in the Ubuntu, in the commonality, in the community, right? And I bring this message from many miles away to say that despite the water between us, we are nonetheless connected. We all, I think, sing the same song of freedom. We all have the similar desires of unity. And I believe that through dialogues like this, we can continue to come together to keep fighting the good fight, because indeed we still have work to do. May we continue to keep the beat. Thank you.
much for that. You know, it provoked ideas on me because I'm a fan of hip hop. And I don't know if you can, you can just tap, because you are new to it a little bit, difference between hip hop and rap.
Okay.
Because there's a whole debate around that. And the second thing, I think, can you tap onto sampling? Because the ideas of sampling historically, how they actually appropriated jazz, how these links of like thinking through, and that idea of sampling in itself, and how history and the contemporary come together in thinking about freedom in itself. Because I think part of the DJing aspects of it that like moved from the 80s was sampling was fundamental in thinking about these things. And those ideas, I think, are quite important in that. And the last one, sorry.
Okay.
Because you're in the, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Cape
okay.
Town is such an important, in terms of South African hip hop, it's such an important hub. You can't think about hip hop in South Africa without thinking about Cape Town. You can't think about hip hop in South Africa without thinking about the Northwest, which they sort of like use Setswana, Motswako music will come from that in terms of thinking about Setswana and hip hop, and also reclaiming our ancestry in different ways and linking it to sampling and linking it to hip hop. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like one of those things. So, I mean, I think, can you tap into those ideas a little bit?
Sure. Thank you. So with respect to the first question, as far as difference between rap and hip hop, again, I just briefly touched upon it earlier, but rap music is the commercial commodified version. And the idea is that you're rhyming words, you're still speaking rhythmically over a beat. But see, again, party people, the difference with hip hop is that whereas rap music is primarily made for entertainment purposes, right? Hip hop takes on an entirely different character. It can be entertaining, but based upon what we had discussed, right, the 5 elements, there's much more of a substantive character to it, right? Where oftentimes education can be a byproduct of hip hop, right? And so I think that in dovetailing into the second question, as far as sampling, hip hop more intentionally and much more strategically does invoke the concept of sampling. Because think about what's going on here. When you mentioned some of those musical genres, you said, jazz, and so before hip hop, R&B, before R&B, funk, before funk, you had the Motown, before Motown, rock and roll, before rock and roll, you had the swing era, before the swing, you had jazz, before jazz, you had the blues, before blues, you had gospel. You notice what's going on here? The idea is that actually hip hop is just the latest iteration and manifestation. It's really nothing new per se, in that we're talking about one continuous thread of Black culture. And again, the culture as is steeped in the concept of tension and resistance. Remember, when jazz first came out, jazz was considered to be revolutionary. There were actually public service warnings about don't listen to it. Well, for a couple of reasons. Like one, it was going to make your body go crazy because of the riffs and things of that nature. And also, it promoted interracial contact because of the Lindy hopping, the type of dance moves, etc. And so, in many ways, you see the parallels with jazz and hip hop now. Now, I mean, jazz is as American as, apple pie and Chevy, right? Kenny G is one of the most famous, I don't know how that happened, saxophonist. I don't know how that happened. I'm a John Coltrane fan. I'm sorry, John Coltrane fan. But the idea is that, and so now I think very similarly, we have a situation where in many hip hop circles, people are frustrated because the idea of what you're talking about is cultural memory, right? And so when you're sampling, I'm directly invoking the same vibrations that were revolutionary back then, and I'm reviving them now. Some stuff like when movie studios will do a remake, what they do is they get you to the theater, and they also get your parents to the theater who saw the original 20 years ago. So and it works for Hollywood. And so for many ways, these artists who are directly sampling are being very intentional and strategic and clever about making that connection to the historical memory. I showed you a couple of slides earlier, and the idea is that when you look at some of these hip hop artists, look at some of the images that they produce. And so it's not just the audio samples, but also, I think, when you look at a Jesus Walks video, there's actual footage of fire-burning crosses and the hooded Klansmen and the chain gang. So I think that I would call that a visual sample, whereby I'm reminding you that I'm connected to this struggle. That it's not all about the rap music version of look at me in my car and all these girls around me. Let me just say this, though, really quickly. Rap music being a related cousin, I understand where it comes from. I don't underwrite it, but I understand where it comes from. If you've been marginalized, rejected, and disillusioned, and you're told that you're nothing, well, wouldn't it make sense to you to make this basic capitalistic argument of, okay, well, if I'm nothing, but I own this car that's $100,000, that means I'm worth something. Check out my car. Check me out in this car. Now I'm worth something too, right? So I think that's the argument. And again, I don't agree with the objectification of our sisters, but this idea of, okay, I had buck teeth, I had shoes that didn't fit me when I was in grade school. Now check out all these people around me giving me all this attention. I must be worth something, right? And so I understand where it comes from, but I think hip hop is a much more complex, measured and mature response that does incorporate the sampling. And again, as you had stated earlier, takes on so many different manifestations. And so, as you had mentioned earlier, for people to rap in their close-side tongue, I think is absolutely phenomenal, because it shows how inclusive an art form this is, and goes to my argument how renewable it is. There is no shortage of our creativity.
I'm curious. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
I was curious why you played Begin in Tupac. Question? Let me give you a mic.
With the mic, we can hear you. Right. Okay. 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 Right. Yes. 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 That's an excellent question. A very excellent question. Whenever a presenter repeats, oh, that's a good question, that means, yeah. And the reason why it's an excellent question is because I don't have an excellent answer, okay? I have an answer, but, I don't have a magic wand here. You're absolutely correct. Once capitalism comes into play, okay, well, it's great to make songs about, how you believe in yourself and Black history and things of that nature, but how are we going to pay the bills, right? I mean, I still need to put gas in the car, food on the table. How's this going to work, right? So here's my answer in two parts. One is, I think, if we're looking around the room and being honest, much of the hip-hop crowd is maybe not with us right now, right? I mean, we're in a privileged space, right? We're in wine country, Stellenbosch, right? At the university, right? And so, all of us are comfortably dressed and, have education. This is interesting. In the middle of the day, we're, able here to talk and think. So let's just be mindful about our separation here, and just be mindful about, I'm not here to shame anybody, right? I'm here too, right? So what if we are more intentional about leveraging our resources to say, well, this is what the government of South Africa should be supporting in terms of when you talk about supporting the arts. We need more channels whereby people can do their craft and be honest to their craft without compromising the quality thereof. So for example, in my country, we need more of them, but we have these things called National Endowment for the Humanities grants or National Endowment for the Arts grants, which will give you, again, you have to go through the paperwork, and it's a lot, but you'll have $50,000 of like 6 months to not do anything. You don't have to report to anybody. You just have time to think and focus on your craft, right? And so I think we can be creative in our circles about what are some mechanisms that we can really start leveraging so that people can be protected, right, and focus on the craft without being distracted by the rigors of capitalism. Because I think ultimately, people do have to eat at the end of the day, right? And I think another way in which to answer that question of how do we keep the youth strong and focused on the true ideals of maybe their craft. I think maybe another way is for us to actually put our money where our mouth is in supporting these artists, right? And so, again, we are having a talk here at the University of Stellenbosch, but I don't know the last time that Ill Skills has been invited to perform at the University of Stellenbosch, for example, right? So, that's something that we could organize. If you're in contact with students, I can suggest it, or if you're a professor in a classroom, you can organize an honorarium to bring them in the classroom and introduce and make contact with the students. You can actually maybe, I don't know, God forbid, go out to the community and, make contact and establish what we call not so much community service, but community engagement models, right, where you're building relationships. And so I think it is definitely going to be a tough road to hoe because capitalism is an amazing machine, and wow, it's been going on for a very long time. It has been. But I think to the extent that we're very intentional and strategic, we can create a new appetite for a new type of product.
Other questions? I think, can you talk? Okay, yes.
So there's no institution really. There's maybe like a few independent institutions where they teach you craft, as opposed to like something like jazz, where you can actually go to a music school and you can learn how to play an instrument, you can mold yourself, you can do all those things. But with hip hop, there is really very little. So these kids don't really know the business side of things. So they go in and they're pumped up on energy and talent and just wanting to get the music out there. But the business side of things, they'll see that word waiver and they'll sign anyway. So how do you get institutions like Stellenbosch or UCT or any of those institutions to start the ideal, the movement to getting alternative art forms?
Yes.
To
Okay.
get them to study, I suppose.
Yes.
Give them access.
Okay, I'm gonna have to take you on tour with me. These are excellent questions. And I'm stimulated by the question because I have an answer for this one. We have to take hip hop seriously. Boom. That's it. It's just that simple. We have to take it seriously now. Remember, when it first came out in the late 70s, early 80s, it was this pernicious influence that was going to permeate the young minds of America and all throughout the world, and it was going to throw the youth over a cliff. Well, 40 years later, we now recognize hip hop to be a multi-billion, with a B, billion-dollar global phenomenon, right? I'm not trying to be funny, but literally the two words hip hop are the sole reason why I'm here. In terms of traveling 7,000 miles away, right? That's the only reason why I'm hip hop. It is of global proportion now. We cannot ignore it. It is here to stay. Just real quick anecdote. In fact, if anything, hip hop is being appropriated in many circles and being sold mostly to white audiences, at least in the States, right? Like we have this high-priced grocery store. It's called Sprouts, okay? So you have a regular grocery store and you have the high-priced grocery store where everything's organic and, okay. So at any rate, Okay. I went in there, I'm sorry, I went in there, I had to get some arugula. They didn't have it at the regular grocery store. Okay, I'm trying to stay healthy. I'm sorry, okay. Yes, I'm intellect. But I'm minding my business and I look at the checkout counter and, they had those reusable bags, right? You know what the bag said? It said, every day I'm bristling. All right, so those who don't get the joke, it's supposed to be play on words. Every day I'm hustling. It's like a hip hop song. I'm like, I'm looking all around. I don't see anybody looking like me in the whole store. In the whole store, or the parking lot, right? Or the whole street, right? No, right? Only time I saw someone look like me was when I passed by the window. I was like, okay, that was it. But yet, here we are in this highfalutin store, and they're talking about every day I'm bristling. Or they had another one, turnip for what? Get it? Turnip for what? So you're right. So we're selling it to the wrong people. So it is in places as precisely like this where we need to take hip hop seriously, create actual coursework, right? We need to write more about it. We need to stimulate the youth. Hey, you can actually write a master's thesis about this. Hey, have you thought about a PhD? Let's find some grant money. You can actually pursue this. We have to create a culture around this where it is scientific. There are methods to it. As I explained to you earlier, it may appear to be a bunch of noise to some, but no, it's actually very organized. There's 5 elements. There's a science or an art to it, if you would. It's organization. And so I think a dialogue like this, I'm very thankful for, right? I want to thank, all the sponsors and organizers for me being in this space because I'm so stimulated and excited because hopefully I come here planting a seed, right, of inspiration. And also I go back to germinate. Like, wow, they were really digging what I was saying about hip hop. Man, I need to fight harder for this, right? I do teach a course, actually, based upon a book that I wrote, actually. It's called The Genius of Hip Hop, right? Or I think it's called, You Mean There's Genius in My Hip Hop or something. I think that's the name of the book. And I fought to create a course, but again, talking about our circles, I really do mean fight. Party of people, if I could tell you the paperwork, and I have to come in and I have to answer the questions, and so what are the learning outcomes of a course like, right? I got to go through all that. I got to go through all that. But now I'm talking to you, I'm thinking, well, maybe we should be more, why reinvent the wheel? Maybe I should be more pragmatic about writing down the responses I did, and as a template, as a playbook, so that way when it's your turn to start a course at the University of Stellenbosch, it's no. The data shows, no, the research shows, it's all sorted, right? We're good to go because we need to create spaces like this where it is being taken seriously. Absolutely, and amen. Thank you for the question.
Can you, while I take this question, talk about the woman in hip hop? Because, you're centering the narrative around men, but there's a whole culture of female MCs and female artists, like lyricists.
Yes. Okay, so to be fair, 20 minutes, I just came in, I was supposed to have 30, so I'm not centering around men per se, although most of the examples I used were of men. There was Beyonce in there. But the point is not to quibble. Just like my life consists of both male and female energy, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for a woman. I don't know about y'all, but I came here on the planet through a woman. I don't know about y'all, but that's how I got. That's how I got here. I think it is absolutely imperative that we recognize the contributions of all, right, within hip hop. And I think that when we look at women in hip hop, a couple things are going on here. One is that earlier models whereby many women were trying to imitate men in terms of the style and presentation, and also the vernacular. For example, I don't know if you've heard of Little Kim, but Biggie Smalls was famous for actually ghostwriting many of her lyrics, thinking that this will market and appeal most to men. But the fact of the matter is that when we talk about spaces and places, I'm actually my 7th year running now of creating what's called a hip hop symposium on campus. And this year, where I'm proud to say that we're hosting Lyric Jones. She's a up-and-coming female artist. You may not have heard of her. Just like they said, Cape Town has a hip-hop Jones. Like Jones is kind of like this idea that you have this pining for it. You're very excited about something. So she's a black female artist who lives her truth, telling about her stories of acceptance, body image issues. She wears her hair short. She's relatively dark-skinned. And so I think that it's very important to have voices like this to have us, complicate the different areas of the spectrum. There's no one way to be a human on a planet. There's no one way to be a black person on the planet. Obviously, we're related, but black people have different struggles here as opposed to over there. There's still this issue going on with black, white, and colored, if I'm allowed to say that out loud, right? Particularly with the Coons Festival, first of the year, something of that nature, if I'm allowed to say that out loud. So we still have these issues that we're still navigating. And I think that, through the many of the voices of women in hip hop, we've been able to complicate what it is that we understand and know. If you're looking for a couple of other female artists that you haven't heard of before, I recommend Rhapsody from North Carolina. She works with the producer DJ Ninth Wonder, and some of her stuff is mind-blowing, like, wow! And so I just think that it's a matter of, you're never gonna hear her stuff on the radio though, because she doesn't have three verses and a hook, right? 16 bars and a hook. She doesn't go by the traditional format. But I think if you're willing to listen to her, what she's going to do is challenge you. And lastly, I'm sorry, I talk about this all day, but lastly, you just remind me that hip hop, I think, is so very crucial to us all because it really has the listener engage in critical thinking. Right? And so Chuck D once called, as you saw earlier, he once called hip hop the black CNN, right? Meaning that it's like this news source, alternate from the mainstream. And the idea is that when you listen to songs, they're like, wait a minute. Wait, actually, the Emancipation didn't free any slaves. Actually, wait a minute. Maybe Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson did what? Wait, he owned slaves? Wait, Thomas Jefferson actually fathered 6 children out of wedlock with a slave named Sally Hemings. So when you hear these messages in hip hop songs, not only does it change your thinking, but it changes your what? Behavior, right? In terms of what it is that you want to do. And I think obviously having strong, thoughtful female voices, within the hip hop canon are going to also inform your behavior and how to act and things of that nature. And the last thing I'll say is that for whatever it's worth, I'm not trying to be melodramatic, but I do stand here, happily married for 22 years. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. And what's so interesting is like in the back of my head, I just have this soundtrack that plays every now and then. It's from Queen Latifah. She made the song called Ladies First. And, she also made other songs like UNITY, Who You Calling Her, right? And I just had these songs in the back of my head, and I just wonder to what degree those soundtracks have been instrumental in me understanding the value of a partner, right? And, not someone behind me supporting, no, of a partner, right? To live life with, right? And truly learning how to respect her, how to listen to her. I'm still learning. But, right? I just wonder to what degree having those models, right? In the absence of, and I'm not trying to get too deep, but I had a father who, who's in the struggle, right? Still in the struggle, right? And he didn't have quite the same relationship, with my mom the way I do with my wife now. And so what I'm saying is if I had gone solely off of the model in my home, who knows what trajectory I would be on right now? And I just wonder if mother hip hop, right, with all the voices, women included, didn't maybe help in some way, shape, or form in terms of me being able to stay on the path.
But there's a misogyny to it because Lil Kim became sort of like the
Well,
most selling.
Okay. See,
artist.
okay. Yeah. See, you're right.
Became sellable.
See, you're right. You're right.
Hip hop versus the Queen
You're right.
Latifah
You're
versus
right.
the Radhika
You're
AR because they were not selling albums
You're right.
as big.
You're right.
Lil Kim sort of like made it mainstream of like
Right.
women can sell
Right.
in this genre.
Yeah.
And came with other
Yeah.
misogyny. And
No,
remember the source.
yeah. Yes.
the photo shoot that she did in terms of like sex appeal, which is, you know, in one level is
Right.
it created misogyny, but at the same time was about claiming your body in one
Right.
level or the other.
Yeah, because I have two quick responses. I want to get a couple more in here. There is the argument of what you call feminist porn. This idea of actually this body is kind of like mine and I can do with it what I want. And if I'm able to leverage power over other men, then so be it. And I think Little Kim was maybe the first, then Foxy Brown, and likely Nicki Minaj and now Cardi B are the latest manifestations of this, right? But you're right, it is still, I guess, problematic. We're still trying to sort this because for some, I mean, think about how, especially Nicki Minaj and Cardi B, this idea of that cream-skinned, goddess. I mean, so black is not good enough, but something that's kind of like approaching whiteness, but not quite white. Oh, that's better. The whole colorism, that's something that is still very much prevalent that we're battling with in the States. I don't want to speak for right here. So that's something we have to navigate. But going back to the Queen Latifah example, I will say this. Yes, it did not sell as much, UNITY, but you know what she did? She stacked her chips from hip hop and then leveraged it into making her own movie production company where she was the star, right? She made a couple of films like Just Right with another hip hop legend, Common, right? So she made a love story again, and she didn't diet down or anything. Her body is her body. And so I think in many ways that she still was able to fight that fight as far as putting out herself, accepting herself who she is and her sexuality as a model. But I agree with you that capitalism monster is a machine. And so the minute you put that formula out there, that's what many people appear to be hungry for. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about that's where we come in terms of teaching ourselves and the youth behind us how to change our appetite.
I feel like it's going to be addressed sort of, but what I wanted to ask or sort of put out there is I'm really curious about the aesthetic of hip-hop and rap and how potentially those two, because there is like a confusion between the two genres.
Yes.
And that's why I'm saying that you sort of touched on, the image of like him, for instance, and perhaps the messages that she produces, right? So I'm just curious to know, or curious to hear your thoughts around, like, social politically, I suppose, because I think in some regards, hip hop becomes like this, like an analog or like a metaphor or something that almost holds something which is able to change society or at least move society forward in a positive light. And then you have rap, which almost sort of turns that on its head. So I'm just curious to know, or curious to hear what your thoughts are around the impact of the aesthetic.
Sure. Well, let me just say this, and again, I prefaced my comments earlier by saying that hip hop is not perfect, right? But neither is Hollywood. Whoa, wait a minute. Maybe I'm feeling offensive just a little bit, but I just take umbrage when we keep talking about hip hop as the whipping boy, as the source of all things evil in our, in our society. I reject that hypothesis. Hollywood has got a head start on hip hop. If you want to see misogyny, just go turning on television tonight. Has anyone heard this TV show called The Bachelor? Excuse me, what is going on? I have 25 ladies lining up, vying for a rose from this one dude. I'm sorry. And this is entertaining? People crying, oh, he didn't pick me. What? No, what? No, but see, it's entertaining when I dress up white woman and it looks all nice. But see, the minute, I with my, little, Jeep, stand outside my neighborhood and I get a little pool and all of a sudden, and I have a fantasy, then all of a sudden I'm misogynistic and the world's about to fall apart. So again, let's be consistent. Misogyny is misogyny, whether it's in hip hop or in Hollywood. But all I'm saying is if you're gonna criticize hip hop, then criticize Hollywood too. That's all I'm saying. So I'm not absolving hip hop of any of its problems, but what I'm saying is let's be consistent. And so what's funny to me is how misogyny, when it's stylized through the white male gaze, takes on a different aspect. It's just not as offensive for some reason. Right? I mean, look at how long the Harvey Weinstein situation went on, right? For so long, and it's arguably probably still going on, that dynamic, right? People leveraging their bodies just for an opportunity, right? So I think that's unfortunate. But in terms of the hip hop aesthetic, I think that what is now starting to happen, one trend that I'm encouraged by, is this idea that there is, I think, a renaissance of the golden era. Remember, Fight the Power is actually played on the radio, right? When we talk about political dynamic, it's amazing if you think about it. Fight the Power is actually played on the radio. And so now we're in a state where most of the most politically potent hip hop arguably is not going to hit the radio airwaves, right? And so, and I think, if anything, it speaks to our whole argument, this idea that in an indirect way, people are recognizing the power and the potential of hip hop to influence and change not just thoughts, but behaviors, right? And so that, because think about it, otherwise, why not play it on the radio? What are you afraid of? It's just a song, right? But the idea is that I actually might change what it is that I'm doing. I think that's a concern. So I think, in one level, hip hop is recognized for having this power and potential. And I think when I talk about this renaissance, this idea of within underground circles, there's like this pride over keeping the craft pure, right? And so many of the underground artists will actually vociferously complain about, oh, people, now messed up the game. It's all about the bling bling now. It's all about the fame, but here we're just keeping it pure, right? We just want to focus on what's pure. And I think there's been enough time for hip hop to, I guess, mature in that respect. First it came out, it was brand new, it was great. Then it's an idea of like, okay, well, what's going on? Now that, 40 years in, you're starting to see more of a direct association with the quote unquote old school, right? That 90 golden era where not only was it cool to be cool, but it was also cool to be political, right? And so I think the idea that merging the two, they're not mutually exclusive. And I think many of the youth, going back to my sister's question here, I think mistakenly believe that maybe I have to sacrifice one over the other. And I think hip hop is shown itself to be durable enough and strong enough to where it can include it all. I find it absolutely remarkable that that people like LL Cool J are now performing in the Kennedy Center, right? The Kennedy Center is like probably our greatest hall to perform in Washington D.C. People like Nas, are now performing in the Kennedy Center, right? This idea that hip hop has come full circle. So if anything, I would like to say that hip hop shows us that if you don't blink, if you believe in your message and believe in who you are, the world will come around to you, right? Because you would think that, many fight the power, many of these people will be ostracized, but if anything, now, they're legends, and people are now trying to sit at their feet and understand from them how they were able to develop that type of political strength to make a statement, stand by it, and without a fear of the consequences, being able to deal with whatever came their way. And I think that we can continue to push matters in that direction, but again, we have that capitalistic monster that we have to slay.
I think one last question, then we go. Okay, what you just said, just complicate it a little bit, because you showed J. Cole, Kendrick, and so on. Because Jay-Z sort of like became the pioneer of how commercials and still be a lyricist, at the same time, can actually happen. And you see it now with, Kendrick, in terms of the Black Lives Matter, We're Gonna Be Alright became a theme in that movement as part of, mobilizing the psyche in that movement. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that type of duality in that process.
No, absolutely. I think that it's not a matter of having one cake and eating it too. I think it's a matter of what I was saying earlier, focusing on what is your slice of cake. And so when you look at the Jay-Z's of the world, I think it's an absolutely phenomenal story, right? This idea of how he started his career versus how he ended it. I don't know if anyone's seen the video for 444, but that was absolutely politically potent. It was a take on some of the blaxploitation cartoons of old, right? And one can make the argument that, well, now that he's financially secure, now he's in a space to where he can be honest and open. But even still, I think that's a step, because many artists don't even do that, right? One common complaint in the barbershop, at least in the States, is, man, what's up with some of these NBA and NFL players? It's like, they struggle, they finally, quote unquote, make it, And then what do? They turn around and give all their money back over to the white man, basically. As opposed to leveraging some more of those funds to build schools like the I Promise School, like LeBron James. That's rare. I mean, Jalen Rose made it school as well. But so many of these players are not using that platform. When you look at the whole Kaepernick-Neal situation, many of us were frustrated in the States that it didn't catch on like more wildfire. I mean, think about it. If us black people don't play the games, there are no games. We're the majority. And so I think Kaepernick was kind of left hanging a little bit, right? So in other words, many people were not willing to use their platform, in the spotlight and take that risk. And so I think that when you look at someone like a J. Cole, I think he literally, as he's grown into his hair, right, has grown into this idea of, and think about the songs that he makes, Crooked Smile, right? Just you got to deal with me the way I am, just be free, Neighbors. He is talking directly about issues that relate to his life, and I think is opening up the door. Even look at someone like Logic, who made the famous 800 song, the suicide song. And so this idea of mental health, I'm encouraged. I still feel as if we have a ways to go in terms of the underground impulse, the political ethos becoming more mainstream, but maybe that's part of the point. Maybe it's not ever supposed to fully become mainstream, but the idea is that hip hop in and of itself, thank God, if it were not around and did not exist as an outlet and a resource for people to express how they truly feel. Again, hip hop, even though I'm not a hip hop artist, I'm very grateful that it's provided me this platform to travel miles and miles away, people I haven't met, to regard me with open arms, to regard me with respect, to ask questions and exchange over what is actually working. This is actually working. Obviously, it touches all of us. Think about your questions. Think about how impassioned so many people are about this topic. It's touching upon something. And so going back to what you said earlier, maybe it's incumbent upon us to take this more seriously, to really sit down and study it so that we can duplicate the formula. No need for us to bake a cake in the dark.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this. This is a very personal topic for me because I do believe hip hop saved my life.
Oh, yeah. Did you hear that? You hear that? Woo!
So thank you.
Yes.
And the drinks and snacks at the back. And the next session of the Ubuntu Dialogue will be on the 22nd of April. So please join us as we decolonize the museums and create space and have conversations as much as we can. So thank you so much for attending.
Thank you so much.